You're listening to Wild Things and Wild Places, a Muley Fanatic Foundation podcast that aims to discuss issues and efforts related to the Muley Fanatic Foundation mission, the conservation of mule deer, furthering the sport of hunting, and sound wildlife management.
Everybody knows I'm a Muley fanatic.
It's time for Wild Things and Wild Places. And here's your guide, Joshua Coursey.
And welcome to another episode of Wild Things and Wild Places. And I've often said I'm excited for this episode, but no, today, new adjective. I am elated. I have a guest today that is not unfamiliar to Wild Things and Wild Places. And of course, I am talking about the director-to-be, Wyoming Game and Fish newly appointed director as of September, Angi Bruce. Welcome, Angi, and congratulations.
Thank you, Josh. It is good to be here and talking with you today.
I would imagine that the last few days has been full of congratulations. This announcement coming out last week, right before the holiday, and I'm sure you have been overwhelmed with the amount of support and just accolades that come with such an announcement like that, and congratulations. Did it catch you by? I knew you were in the final three that the commission had put forward to the governor, but to get the official announcement, just walk me through the emotions that came with.
Oh, yes, Josh. It definitely was extremely emotional for me. Getting that call from the governor, I think if I think back on that day, I think I might have screamed on the phone. So definitely excited. Even though you're in the top three, you anticipate the maybe. But when it actually happens, it means something different. And it's really sunk in over the last few days with everybody reaching out. It's Wyoming, so the support comes from everywhere. Both it has from within the department and outside. And it just makes me reflect about how much it really is a good honor, truly honored to represent the fish and wildlife resources of the state, and then being able to lead what I view as the strongest and the most passionate and dedicated state game and fish agency in the nation. So it's been overwhelming. It's been a lot, and it is slowly sinking in.
And I would be remiss if I didn't mention, only because I've seen so many of the other headlines that are out there, not only in print media, but in radio advertisement and media, news, and then as well the digital world. A lot of the headlines seem to want to key in on the fact that you are the first woman to lead a fish and wildlife agency, and certainly the first for the state of Wyoming in its 51-year agency history. How does that fit with you? I for some reason, that just wasn't something on my radar. I just thought, I know you were qualified. I was excited for that, but there seems to be a lot of attention about the first woman in this position. How can you walk me through that a little bit?
Yeah, Josh, I am a little bit taken back about the headlines and the comments and support I've gotten from folks. And I've worked in this field for 27 years, and it is definitely a male-dominated field. However, I always have viewed it as working with a really good group of passionate, talented folks. And so when the outreach came from so many people, both in the department and outside in the conservation community, but also just people I meet on the street. At the gym the other day, I had a lady walk up to me and say, "Hey, I saw the press release. Congratulations." And she really focused on that piece about being the first woman. And it struck me pretty hard that, wow, this does mean something to people. I might have taken it a little bit for granted, but I think what it does is it just demonstrates for women who are in the field or want to be in the field in the future that any position that they can try for, get promoted to, and it's not out of reach. So hopefully by me being the first woman, it's really showing and demonstrating a path for future women down the road as well.
I'm sure there's been a moment where you've had the opportunity to step back and just ruminate on the fact that it is historic. It is a landmark move in that regard. And 50 years from now, there will not be another first. You are the first. And I think that makes you a trailblazer in some regards. But I would also like to think that we're in a day and age where that is no longer something that we have to be constantly talking about, because some of those barriers have been just bowled over. But again, congratulations. Certainly, I was rooting for you to get this position and the work that we have done with you and your leadership as the Deputy Director of External Affairs. A lot of this job is going to entail working with our federal partners and our private landowners and everyday sportsmen and sportswomen and NGOs. What do you see the biggest challenge in accepting this?
Yeah, Josh, there is challenges. Wyoming is in such a good place with our wildlife resources, but there's always challenges. They're different from what they were yesterday, and they'll be different tomorrow. But there's definitely things on my mind. Let's start with mule deer since I am talking with you today, so we'll start there. That, to me, is something that is a huge challenge for us right now. We are not happy with where our mule deer numbers are today. And looking at all of our work and all of our efforts put into the habitat and the mule deer population, we are looking closely, and I would really like to emphasize more work and more strategic work in a collaborative fashion on the habitat that we need to make as resilient as possible for mule deer to be able to sustain other pressures on them. We know there's so many things that are out of our control, primarily weather, and somewhat a little bit disease is as well. But those things that are within our control, maintaining intact landscape and making our habitat the best quality we can possibly make, are really where I'd like to put some more attention on, and it's a huge challenge. Another one that I'd like to talk about too is, yes, you mentioned the federal government, our land management agencies, especially both the Bureau of Land Management and the Forest Service, with 50% of the land in Wyoming under federal management, it's definitely a priority to continue our efforts to influence the condition of that habitat on those lands to benefit wildlife. And so it's a huge challenge right now. We will see what after November where the challenge goes, but with each administration things change, and so there's just new challenges. Continuing to work with our federal partners is essential. We can go out there and we can put up a fight and we can arm ourselves, but at the end of the day, what I have seen work is when we can get ahead of the problem and help collaborate with them. An example of this is our federal Department of Interior agencies put together some what I call sagebrush focal areas, or they're calling it a Keystone Initiative. I'll tell you that the disappointing thing when they put this together is they didn't come to us to put it together. However, we reached out to them, we got involved, we said we want to help, and now they're moving towards putting millions of dollars into these key areas for restoration and conservation practices, and we say we want to help, let us get in there. We didn't just push back and say we don't agree because you didn't involve us up front, but we find a way to insert ourselves because we know at the end of the day what matters is the results of that and what we can do for wildlife. So the federal challenges, both on the end of habitat and on the Endangered Species Act end, are going to continue. I don't see that going away. I think where we just need to continue to work is our approach and how we work with them.
Yeah, that is littered with challenges. There's no doubt when you deal with the federal partners, but it does take relationships. It does take being able to have solid communications. In my mind, and the experience that I've had in working with you, that's where you shine. You've been able to have those solid relationships and to be able to maintain those communications that are solution-oriented. You've certainly led the way when it comes to wildlife crossings for the department for the state of Wyoming, and then that coupled with the participation and the investment from our federal partners, I think you've built a solid track record of success in being able to do that. When you talk about endangered species, and of course everyone is mindful of the fact that Wyoming Game and Fish and our state has really no authority when it comes to the management of feral horses and grizzly bears. Where do you see that moving forward on your watch, and how monumental will that be to see potentially the grizzly bear delisted under your watch? I would like to think that could occur. It seems like we're moving the needle in that direction, but where do you see both of those issues and how you can help navigate those troubled waters?
I really like what you just said, Josh, the delisting. And I think that's where we need that conversation to go. It's not a matter of if they need to delisted, it's a matter of when. And it should happen. We have the data to prove it will happen. We are committed and to the challenge of keeping to work through the legal battles to ensure that happens. As it's been 20 years that we have met the population objectives for the grizzly bear, it's time. It's time for a listing. So that definitely is on my radar, and we'll be working closely with our federal partners to figure out exactly how we can get that done. We have a lot of things in play. It's actively moving ahead. We will see where it goes when we get them delisted. Feral horses, now that's a challenge. This one is a tough one. We have made great strides working with the reservation and helping to assist them with roundups. I think has done so much for the state of Wyoming and for feral horse management just across the West. It shows how it can be done and can be done successfully. But the neat thing that came from that activity is really demonstrating the reservation has done an excellent job of demonstrating the impact of that removal. They have documented, photographed impacts of the destruction on the forage that those horses were creating before they were removed, and then the post effect of having them removed. That is exactly what we need to continue working on this issue, is that documented evidence that the impact was there, and look what resulted with removal. That some of that evidence has been lacking in the past, so it's made our case in trying to get more horses off the landscape very difficult. And so now we're building the evidence to help support the BLM for future horse roundups in Wyoming.
Yeah, and I'm glad. I think you worded that perfectly. It seems like the support of BLM, it seems like the BLM in the folks that I've visited with, from not only the district offices, but even all the way to the state office, it's like they recognize that this is a problem, but that doesn't necessarily equate to the public supporting it outside of our state. And it seems like that outside influence that continues to prolong some of their efforts to remove or gather and round up and provide these healthy landscapes, that's met with some resistance from other entities and other individuals that really gain a lot of traction in their ability to rally and oppose such efforts. To hear you say support, it does seem like the BLM does already have that in mind, but being able to get it to come to fruition seems to be part of the challenge.
You are exactly right, Josh, and giving them the support and providing that documentation that shows the impacts to wildlife is definitely part of the key pieces then to educate folks that we may see that are opposing these roundups or removals. We're not going to change everyone's mind. However, if we can build the support with the evidence, we get a lot farther. And it's exactly what BLM needs to continue their work.
I look forward to being engaged to those conversations and those efforts. I think that when you mention loss of habitat, both quality and quantity, there is certainly an opportunity to improve that just within what we can do to remove some of those competitive efforts that are on those landscapes. And when you talk competition, it's not just feral horses. You're well aware the department has been facing this for some time with a robust and growing elk population in particular landscapes that have become refuges, if you will, because of private land ownership for booming elk populations. That's not something that's real unfamiliar for you in your experience prior to coming to Wyoming. There is some similarities, I would think, from when you were in Iowa working with the Department of Natural Resources and the whitetail populations, and some of those same issues probably overlap. How do you plan to navigate some of that? Because that conversation has been very prominent over the last couple of years.
It definitely has. And what I have noticed lately about that conversation is the department has done an excellent job of describing the situation where elk management isn't as easy as increasing our hunting license for elk, but there's lots of details, intricacies within elk management. And you talked about it, refuges, access. And just talking to reporters the last few days, it was really rewarding to have them ask similar questions because they're understanding the issue as well. And Yes, in Iowa, we had very similar issues we faced. Balancing what I call the social preference of wildlife management with the population is always key. There's a balance. Like in Iowa, we had different species we were working on, but very similar circumstance where you had white-tailed deer get too high and you had a lot of damage. We saw it on more of the row crop farms there. But when they got too low, our constituents, our hunters, did not want to see that. So there's what we call this magic line in the middle of that balance. And that's really what we're trying to meet here with elk management in Wyoming. And we still have a ways to go. We're putting lots of things in place. And what I see us doing even more so in the future is really being creative. We have a lot of tools we've used in the past that aren't working as effectively. So how can we be creative? How can we offer landowners access incentives that still allow them to harvest and operate the way they want, but allow some access as well? So we're looking at some creative ways to do that and hopefully to address some of those island situations you referred to with the refuges and continue to find that balance. It's a huge issue in Wyoming, and we want to see that get back to something acceptable for all Wyoming Knights. We're really fortunate, Josh, in Wyoming that we have very few of these problems. As I visit with other colleagues around the nation, they spend about 90% of their time on efforts with too many wildlife. And that's because their population, their human population, is at larger levels than we have in Wyoming. So they're constantly working through what I call urban wildlife situations. We're very fortunate here, but elk management is one that we need to get it into a place that we're happy with again.
I can't imagine what some of the feelings are, and I've tried to, that you as a new soon-to-be director of a wildlife agency, Wyoming has got to be at the top of the nation. I would think of desirability for someone in your field to want to lead a state whose charge is to conserve wildlife and serve the public. Wyoming it's where it's at.
You know, Josh, it is. 7 years ago, I came here from Iowa, and my coworkers, my biologist friends, when I told them I was leaving, they never asked why. They just knew. It's a wildlife biologist's dream to work in Wyoming. And it's pretty incredible. It's pretty incredible to represent this department on a national stage. We get a lot of questions. How do you get things done there? How do you do so much? You're a relatively small agency. We don't have 2,000 staff like Texas does. But we have so much going for us, and we have such a good reputation. It's really an honor to represent it. One time I was in a meeting, and I just kept getting asked over and over, how could we get these things done? And it dawned on me that we have a process in Wyoming to handle challenges. Josh, you've been on many of those working groups and committees, but it's something I've been impressed with since I came to this state. A lot of other states use working groups, public involvement to sit down at the table to handle challenges. But I think what we do differently here is I can sit down with a group of folks such as the sage grouse implementation team, and we can work on sage grouse across the table from oil and gas, county commissioners, legislators, mining folks, NGO, conservation organizations, and work on a problem. And then we have another one come up, say migration corridors, bighorn sheep. And when we sit down at that table, it's the same people, relatively the same people who were used to working on challenges with each other, and relationships are already built. Because of that, and because of the smallness that we seem to be, we can get a lot of achieved really quickly, and we have this culture of doing it very well collaboratively together.
Yeah, boy, that just makes me want to put my shoulders back and lift my head up high, knowing that we are doing things differently. When this is all, you don't realize that others are doing it a bit differently, but it works for Wyoming and it works well. And you've heard it before. We've referenced it. It is the Wyoming way to bring various stakeholders together that are all looking for the right solutions and can flesh that out together. And boy, you hit on it. I am curious, in your time as deputy director with Director Nesvik, and certainly I admire Director Nesvik immensely, and I think his leadership has been tremendous. What have you learned from the style of leadership that Director Nesvik has been able to lead with?
Josh, I really like that question because over the last 5 years, I've gotten to know the director quite well. And I have worked under a lot of directors, I think 7 different ones when I was in Iowa. So I've seen a lot of different leadership styles. And I can truly say that I would not be in this position today if it wasn't for Director Nesvik's leadership. He has definitely allowed me freedoms in my positions. He's encouraged me to try things, take risks, work on different special projects that helped Wyoming. But he's also always been there. When I run into a jam, need advice, he's there to give it. So his leadership in encouraging myself, others within the leadership team and the staff to do what they do best is pretty remarkable. He provides what I call the best thing about a leader, which is that overall guidance and vision that you need for people then to work under. And again, if I had not had this opportunity to work under him the last 5 years, there's no way I would be prepared at all for this position. But I've seen that example and seen him run this department exceptionally well, and it's really helped me prepare for this job.
Yeah, that experience has been invaluable. I think when you look at some of the responsibility of the position and you look, if you could break down and maybe divide it up into 4s: federal partner relationships, private landowner relationships, the Wyoming Game and Fish Commission and the field staff and the staff of the entire agency, and then the public, resident and non-resident. Boy, that is a huge puzzle and very different pieces within that puzzle, but to be able to navigate and work with and within each of those as different pieces of the pie, that's a huge charge of responsibility.
It definitely is. And yeah, it's a challenge for sure. I'm lucky to be raised on a farm in Iowa and spent a lot of time in my career working with private landowners. And that is just something I have always loved and been drawn to. The ranching community in Wyoming has been extremely embracing, different from row crops that we have in Iowa, but definitely what I've found by comparing and contrasting the two is that they both, when working with landowners, they share that conservation ethic, that land ethic, and tie to the land that is so important, and that I grew up with. My dad's 84, and he still farms on our farm in Iowa. He's taught me that growing up, and hopefully I can carry that into Wyoming and into this job as well.
I'm certain that you will achieve what you set your mind out to do with this. You have proven that in the things that you have taken on with your responsibilities as the deputy director. I'm curious, have you identified some goals that you have going forward?
Good question. I'll be working on that more intensely over the next couple months. I don't want to be too premature because I am really listening to others, both within the department and outside. I've had a lot of folks reach out to me with where they see some directions that they would like Wyoming to go in, and I'm really looking for that input. I've talked a little bit about mule deer and habitat. Those are on my mind, as well as the federal agencies and our collaboration with them. But that's where I am right now. I'll come out with maybe a little bit more details as we get closer to September, and I've heard from more folks.
All right. I'm curious, Director-to-be Bruce, which just sounds so nice to be able to say, but what's the elephant in the room? What can't seem to be done that needs to be done? And I'm sure there are many issues. CWD is littered with challenges, but what is the one elephant in the room that just needs to be tackled, but yet we've yet to be able to figure out exactly how to do it?
That's a good question. This department has never shied away from challenges. Under Director Nesvik's leadership, our wildlife division took on feed grounds, which is one of the most complex wildlife challenges across the nation. So there are difficult ones here in Wyoming. CWD, diseases coming at us, other diseases, is one that it gives me a lot of just try to sleep at night thinking, how can we deal with CWD? It's a hard one. I like to really get out in front of challenges and try to avoid them. This is one that we don't have all the knowledge that we need to do that effectively, and maybe we never will. So it has been a long, multi-decade problem and will continue to be. So there's a challenge there with CWD. I think another challenge when I look at not so much Wyoming, but the rest of the nation in different parts. Wyoming is one of the things I love about Wyoming is our citizens are very knowledgeable and very passionate about wildlife. And they trust and value the work of the department to manage the wildlife. But what we're seeing with different media avenues, social media, and et cetera, across the landscape is folks really trying to impact how we manage wildlife and not having the basic understanding of it, questioning the science, questioning the data. And that is concerning. That's a nationwide, worldwide problem that Wyoming's not going to solve. But at the end of the day, I'm hopeful that Wyoming citizens will continue to understand and value the work of the department, and will base our work in the future continued with that foundation being on the strong science that we're known for.
On that note, and I'm glad to hear you bring that up, when you talk about sound science and the application and implementation of such management practices associated with that, that's a tall order to get the public to understand that. Is that just more of an educational effort that needs to be more refined? You've heard the public participation in public meetings has dwindled, and some of that, of course, is probably just due to the technologies, and people at their convenience can go back and watch it online or can weigh in from their keyboard at work and weigh their comments in. But that lack of engagement face-to-face with the local folks at the regional offices within these meetings there is room for improvement there, no doubt. But how you mitigate that or remedy that, do you have different ideas on things that are happening now that maybe could increase that?
Definitely. The engagement is different. You said it. Definitely different than early in my career. But the department still highly values those one-on-one conversations with our field staff, with landowners, with constituents, and we will continue to dedicate a large part of our time to doing that. That is so hugely valuable. We're always looking at different creative ways to reach the public, like you mentioned, adding virtual options. But we are seeing this level of engagement definitely decline, and to get people interested and just have those side conversations so that we know what is working. As we hear a lot from folks who don't like what's working, and that can be difficult with balancing it with what is. And in the past, we used to have so many people show up at season-setting meetings, the commission meetings, and we're not seeing that as much. There's different ways to do that, though, Josh. As being an NGO organization, you have a group of constituents, and our NGO partners seem to always be at the table. We can use our NGO partners as helping us understand the voice of hunters, and that can be very valuable because they're reaching them in different ways. And so we need to continue to understand what the public and our hunting community and angler community wants, and we're just going to have to get creative. We've talked about different ways, such as different surveys to understand, but I think we're going to have to use our partners and you guys more in order to do that.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that. I had a few questions in mind knowing we would be having this conversation. And one of those questions was, and it was two-part really, it was what more, knowing that you're in this position and you're leading this wonderful agency that has got a enormous charge of responsibility, but you're not doing this alone. You have a tremendous staff, and you have a tremendous state of constituents and stakeholders that care about our wildlife resources. But what is the challenge that you could give me that we could share with others? What are things and what are some of the the efforts that you would like to see more on the public side from not only individual citizens and sportsmen and sportswomen, but also the NGO community. What more can we do? Like the Jerry Maguire theme, I guess. Help me help you. What can we do more that you see that's lacking, that maybe there's room for improvement and more engagement?
Good question, Josh. Back to that education, I think helping us get information out and the correct information, because we know that there's so much incorrect information out there. There's so many resources people have to go to, but our NGO communities, Muley Fanatics, are trusted resources that people look to. So helping us get that correct information out there, but then reversing that, helping us hear from people, letting us know what you hear. It should be a back and forth discussion. So here's the correct information, but tell us how you feel about that. Help us get input when we're working on new rules, possible legislation. Help us get people stepped up to the plate and engaged in those key opportunities that matter. And then secondly is definitely get involved. There is so much work to do. We started this conversation talking about habitat work and getting involved, habitat projects. Take your family, take your friends out and do a fence removal, but not so much just to what we accomplished that day, but take a kid or two with you. Get the younger generation understanding both the need to volunteer and be engaged in something they care about, but also providing them that education of what we're doing at the same time. So I think two sides of it. They're more that active physical participation, but then also with communication as well.
Yeah, very much agreed on that. If someone wasn't familiar or hadn't had the opportunity to be in the arena working with you for the last 5 years in your time here with Wyoming, what would you describe your leadership style as? What kind of leader are you, Director Bruce?
I'd like to say that I really like to engage in folks and hear everyone's side of the story before setting direction, especially when working on those tough issues. I'm very analytical, so I like to have all the information from all sides in front of me. I think that's extremely important. Take migration corridors. When the commission's making a decision to designate, identify, recognize a corridor, it's good to have all sides in the room to make that decision. I think that's hugely valuable of having all that information. And then I'm really a big proponent of explaining the why and letting folks know this is why the decision is made. This is what I'm thinking. This is the why. You may disagree with it, but I think having all the information is very valuable. And then setting that overall direction. If I can come out, you asked earlier about the goals that I have, but really setting that direction for the agency and for others and letting them know where we think the priorities are. So everybody can take charge of that and use their own expertise to help implement that. I'm not a micromanager and never want to be. I want to empower others to do what they're really good at. And that's where I think my leadership style will come into benefit here and hopefully make some change and continue to grow the value and the populations of Wyoming.
Boy, that's a breath of fresh air for me to hear you say. I have not found, especially with large efforts, where micromanagement really works. There must be trusted people that can do their job and the ability to do their job and do it well for it to work across the board. And I think that's an outstanding quality. On a personal note, what makes Angi Bruce tick?
Oh, that's a funny question. Yeah, I thrive on seeing success. So when we accomplish great things and get things done in this state, it definitely fuels me for a long time. I like challenges. I like to work on challenges, and it excites me. We talk a lot in the department these days about work-life balance, and working on wildlife management, conservation issues is a huge part of me. It's a huge part of my life, and it is my life. But outside of that, I do like to relax and spend time outside every chance I can get. Being in Wyoming 7 years, sometimes it still feels like new. I spend all my free time exploring Wyoming, doing everything I can outside, and it's truly been fantastic 7 years doing that. When I want a sweet escape, I can jump to the snowies for the day if I need to clear my head. And then my world tends to wrap around my 15-year-old son. Somebody said what my favorite activity was outside, and my response to that is anything my son wants to do. For a while, we did nothing but hunt rabbits, and then really into antelope hunting. Now he's getting more into fishing. So anytime I can spend outside with him, promoting his interest is where my heart is.
Yeah, that's the Wyoming way right there. You just hit it. That's like we came full circle. That was perfect. No, I appreciate the opportunity to be able to visit with you. I'm very excited about what lies ahead for you and the department. I think the department is in great hands. I commend Governor Gordon. He had very challenging thoughts that I'm sure he had to ruminate upon himself with the final 3 applicants that the commission had forwarded, all 3 very qualified. I think he's made the right decision, and I'm excited where this is going to go for the future of Wyoming and be under the leadership of Director Angi Bruce. I think it's historic. I think none of us at this moment in time on the timeline of history can really grasp how monumental this is, but it is, and it's going to be significant. It's going to be something that, as you've laid out yourself, that we'll do together, and that's what will make this work. And I'm excited for that opportunity to be in that arena with you. Director Bruce, thank you for your time, and we wish you the best of luck. And just more than anything, want you to know that those lines of communication are constantly open. And if you see something that could be done that can help, we are ready and we are willing, and we will build an army of those that can get to the solution-oriented efforts that Wyoming needs to continue to lead the way.
Thanks, Josh. I appreciate that. We know what the challenges are today, but there will be other ones in the future as well, and we will need that. We will need yourself and others to step up to the plate to help, because it will take an army, like you said. So I look forward to it. I look forward to the challenges, and I thank you for the conversation today.
Absolutely. Director-to-be Angi Bruce, who will take over as the director of the department in September upon the retirement of the current director, Director Brian Nesvik. We wish Director Nesvik his best in his new chapter and journeys within his next trek of adventure. But as we're focused on the Wyoming Game and Fish Department, the leading department in the entire nation, in my mind, for wildlife management, Wyoming Game and Fish, with its new director announced here recently, Director Angi Bruce. Thank you very much, Angi. We appreciate your time. And that's been another episode of Wild Things in Wild Places. Please share with others and let them know. This is very important, as Director Bruce has laid out the engagement from the public, and the willingness to be more engaged is something that is very much needed. Director Angi Bruce.
And that wraps up another episode of Wild Things and Wild Places. But remember, the journey doesn't end here. Make sure you never miss out by subscribing. Whether you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, streaming us on our website, or following us on social media, subscribing is the best way to stay connected. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for more wild episodes.
Everybody knows I'm a muley fanatic.